What's going on? Today we're checking out these 10 digicams in front of me that you can pick up for less than $100 each. Every one of these is going to give you that classic CCD sensor vintage digital look, and they all have their own unique characteristics, design, and resolution. So really, no matter what type or brand of digicam you're looking for, there should be a good option for you here. Now I'm going to do my best to link places that you can buy all of these used down in the description, but really the best place to get cameras like these are at thrift stores, garage sales, flea markets, and really places like that. But I'm still going to do my best to find reasonable places to buy all these used online as well. Now lastly, before we get into it, every photo you see out of these cameras are either straight out of the camera or edited with my brand new Essentials preset pack. So if you want to support my channel and get better looking photos, I'll drop the link to that down in the description. Now without further ado, these are 10 digicams under $100. Okay, first up we have these cameras in the 1 to 5 megapixel range. So all four of these cameras are from the late 90s to really early 2000s. So they're really gonna give you that old digital look. They're gonna be really low resolution, somewhat soft, or even a little bit blurry just because of how low resolution some of them are. But because of all those reasons, these cameras right here are gonna give you the absolute most vintage, filmic digital look out of all these other cameras. So first up, this right here is the Leica Digilux Zoom. So this camera came out in 1999 and it has a 1.5 megapixel sensor. But the thing about this one, so I have the Leica version right here, which is gonna be a little tricky to find under $100. But this camera was actually based off of and pretty much copied from the Fujifilm MX-1700. These two cameras are essentially identical besides the branding and Leica badge versus Fujifilm badge on their cameras. And the Fujifilm copy you can easily find for under $100. And this right here is definitely the most unique looking camera in this entire video. So you can see this has a much more tall build and it actually feels really comfortable to hold because of that. It's pretty ergonomic in the hands and it's fully built out of metal, so it feels pretty good and solid as well. As I mentioned, this is 1.5 megapixels. It's the oldest camera on this list, released in 1999. So you are just not really gonna get a sharp picture out of this camera. And I don't mean that in a bad way. Like obviously all of these cameras are kind of meant nowadays to give you that not very perfect look. In this circumstance, that actually does add to the character of these, and it's kind of the reason you'd purchase these cameras in 2025, you know, being well over 20 years old. So also being the oldest camera here, the Leica Digilux Zoom is very slow to operate. You know, powering it on, zooming, focusing, going through the menus, literally everything about it is very, very, very slow. And especially the time it takes to process each picture after you take it. You pretty much just have to let this sit for like a solid 10 seconds to let the photo save to the memory card before you can even take another photo again. So in that sense, this really is like a digital film camera. For memory cards, it uses these really old, like floppy disk looking cards. I forget what they're called. I think it's called like Smart Media or something like that. They literally look like tiny floppy disks and they are a little bit hard to find. I ended up buying this one as well as the reader off Amazon for like $30 or $40. So that's something to keep in mind. The media for this is a little bit pricey, but again, this is one of my favorite cameras in this whole video just to use. Also, I forgot to mention, this uses proprietary rechargeable batteries. So you can also buy these brand new off Amazon still, but again, a little harder to come by and a little bit pricier than other just standard batteries. All right, next up we have the Sony CyberShot P32. So this is a 3 megapixel camera from Sony that was released in 2003. And you can tell this kind of has that same type of styling. You know, kind of that turn of the century, early 2000s or late 90s, like futuristic silver styling that a lot of things kind of had in that era. And so this is a super, super simple camera. It's very light and small as well. And it just has a fixed lens, so it doesn't zoom in or out at all. This is definitely one of the most straightforward and just simple cameras. You kind of just power this thing up and take photos with it. And at 3 megapixels, it also gives you very soft but really vintagey looking photos. Lots of flaring and ghosting and things like that. Again, very imperfect, but I absolutely love the photos coming out of this thing. And again, mostly it's simplicity. You can just put this thing in your pocket, carry it around with you wherever, and just not have to worry about it. Just snap pictures of things. It does take AA batteries, which could be a good thing, could be a bad thing, depending on what you prefer. I mean, they're definitely a lot easier just to swap them out when your camera dies, but it's a little bit more of a hassle to, you know, bring a bunch of AA's with you as well. But I will talk about pretty much a perfect solution to that in just a minute. Other than that, the Sony P32 does take a proprietary memory card. It's called a Memory Stick Pro, and this is definitely one of the pricier and harder to find memory cards, but you can get SD adapters for this or micro SD adapters, which make it a little bit simpler. Other than that, there's not really much to say about this other than showing you pictures from it. Okay, so a lot of the cameras in this video, and really most older digicams like these, run on AA batteries. But the issue with just standard alkaline batteries is, first of all, they're absolutely terrible for the environment. You also end up spending a ton of money over time. Like, I really could not even imagine the amount of money I've spent over the years. But that's why I started using sustainable rechargeable batteries from today's sponsor, EBL. So as soon as I started testing these cameras and taking them on trips with me, I knew I needed some rechargeable batteries, and I ended up buying some EBL batteries off Amazon. And I instantly loved how much better these were for traveling and just not having to take a huge pack of like Amazon Basics AA's like I normally would. And then actually a few months after that, EBL ended up emailing me inquiring about a sponsorship. So of course I thought that would be an absolutely perfect fit for this video. EBL offers tons of different rechargeable batteries that are eco-friendly, made with sustainable materials, and they really just save you tons of money over time. Like, I really couldn't even imagine how much money I've spent on AA's, AAA's, C's, and D batteries over the years, when I really could have just been using the same rechargeable batteries the whole time. So if you want to save money in the long run and really just help cut down on waste, I'm going to leave a link to get EBL rechargeable batteries down in the description. So huge thanks to EBL for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to it. Next up, another one of my favorites for getting that really old school vintage digital look is this Kodak EasyShare DX7440. So a 4 megapixel camera that Kodak released back in 2004. I'm a pretty big fan of these photos. They're actually surprisingly sharp for the resolution and for the age of this camera. Now this camera also is a little bit bulkier and has a pretty big grip on it, which is really nice to hold. And it actually has quite a few manual options and controls that you can adjust versus a lot of other cameras like this. So you can manually adjust your shutter speed, ISO, and aperture. Again, that's not very common in a lot of these types of cameras. So it's pretty neat to have those manual controls in that. I also really like the colors coming out of this camera. And again, it's surprisingly sharp for its resolution as well. This is overall just a great bang for the buck camera. It also has a pretty good zoom range with a 4x optical zoom as well as an optical viewfinder. It of course has a flash built in as well. Every single one of these cameras has a built-in flash. And then also this takes rechargeable batteries. So it's kind of a personal preference thing if you prefer AA or AAA batteries versus proprietary rechargeable batteries. But this one does have rechargeable batteries. And then lastly, in the 1 to 5 megapixel range is the Canon PowerShot A80. This thing is an absolute beast. It's bulky, it's heavy, it has a much more professional build versus all these other ones. It's definitely almost fully built out of metal. I mean, this thing is an absolute brick compared to these other cameras. So this is a 4 megapixel camera that Canon released back in 2003. But here's the thing, this is another camera that has a surprising amount of professional features. This one even has a fully articulating flip screen. The only camera in this entire video that has a fully articulating screen like that. So definitely great for taking selfies and really good colors out of this camera as well. Also surprisingly sharp optics. It has a zoom lens, an optical viewfinder, and even joining the kind of more professional feature set on this camera is actually a CF or compact flash card slot. So this doesn't take standard SD cards. It takes the same media cards that Canon's, more professional DSLR cameras took back around the era that this was released. This camera blows me away every time I use it by just the quality of photos coming out of it. Again, especially for the age and resolution that it is. But the last thing to mention, this does take 4 AA batteries. So that adds a bunch to the weight of this, as well as the logistics of just carrying a bunch of spare batteries with you. This takes 4 AA batteries and it doesn't eat through them super fast, but like all these other cameras, you're really gonna wanna take at least some spares with you for batteries. So having 4 AA batteries is definitely a little bit of a hassle. And that's it for the 1 to 5 megapixel cameras. Let's move on to the next ones. All right, next up we have the 6 to 9 megapixel cameras, although there's only 2 here, so 6 and 7 megapixels. First up is the Canon PowerShot SD600. This is a tiny camera. Like, it's crazy how tiny this camera is versus how great the images coming out of it are. So this is a 6 megapixel camera Canon released back in 2006. And this is dimensionally the smallest camera here. It's so portable, it's so easy to toss in your pocket. I really love carrying this thing around with me, and it also is made fully out of metal, so it feels like just a little brick. This definitely has above average build quality compared to the rest of these. The photos coming out of this really have a surprisingly filmic, organic look to them as well. I absolutely love the photos coming out of this thing. I love carrying this thing with me. It just takes regular SD cards and just a regular rechargeable battery. It has a 3x zoom lens, so not a ton of range, but it gets the job done. It's better than having a fixed lens at least. There's not really much else to say about this camera. I love the photos coming out of it. It even has a built-in optical viewfinder, even with how small this is. When it comes to just pure portability, this is definitely my pick. And then next up we have the Casio Z750. So this is a 7 megapixel camera that Casio released in 2005. And this is another just super tiny, simple camera. Almost as small as the SD600, but a little bit bigger dimensionally. It takes surprisingly sharp photos with really good colors. It even has some manual modes, so you can change your aperture, shutter speed, ISO, things like that. You're also getting a 3x optical zoom with this. Again, it's really similar to this Canon SD600, both released in really similar years. And this one also just has a standard rechargeable battery and SD card. But one kind of unique feature of this that I don't know why they added it, but it's just kind of cool that they did. There's actually a voice recorder mode in this dial that's just purely a voice recorder. So it doesn't record a video or anything like that. It's just simply a voice recorder mode. There's not even a microphone input on this, which is interesting. So it just uses the built-in microphones, which I'll show you a sample of that if I remember to record one. It's just kind of a fun, weird non-camera feature that this Casio has.
Testing. This is the voice recording mode on the Casio Z750. Honestly, I'm not really sure what this would be useful for, but I figured I'd just show an example just in case.
But that's it for the 6 to 9 megapixel range. Now let's move up to the high resolution ones. Alright, last but definitely not least, we have the cameras from 10 to 12 megapixels. So these cameras are going to be the newest on this list. They're going to have the most clinical, most just sharp, basic image quality, at least compared to the ones from the late 90s and really early 2000s. But again, the newest camera out of these 4 is still from 2010, so still 15 years old. And all of these cameras still have CCD sensors, which is kind of an older sensor type that just has a little bit more organic look than CMOS sensors, which are pretty much what most new sensors are. So again, even though these are going to be more clinical, more high resolution, sharp cameras, the newest one out of these 4 is still from 2010. That's 15 years old still. But the image quality isn't going to be as different from each other, since these are kind of all towards the end of the Digicam era. You know, the 12 megapixel range is kind of the end point for these CCD older digital cameras like these. So first up is the Canon PowerShot SX130IS. So this is a 12 megapixel camera that Canon released in 2010. So this is the newest, most modern camera, and it definitely feels like it. It definitely looks like it. It has a pretty big screen on the back. It has quite a few manual controls. You know, it has things like noise reduction built in to kind of give you cleaner, better looking images. And again, most of the time, this gives you really sharp, great quality images. You know, especially if you're really looking for that modern, sharper look that's going to be more competitive with something like an iPhone. But this also is a pretty bulky camera, and it definitely has a big zoom lens built into it. So this is a 12 times optical zoom lens. So you can zoom in really far optically without losing image quality. And so this is a perfect option if you want a really big zoom range. You want just better quality photos than, you know, these older cameras will give you. This is going to be the most modern, perfect camera for that. And it also takes just 2 standard AA batteries and then takes standard SD cards for the media. Next up we have this right here. This is the Kodak EasyShare M1033. So this is a camera that was released in 2008 and it has a 10 megapixel sensor. So still fairly high resolution, and this one also looks pretty modern. It's really thin. It has a big screen on the back that pretty much takes up almost the entire back of the camera. Other than that, this has a 3 times optical zoom, so a decent zoom range, but it's just super simple. Like overall, there's a very small amount of buttons on this camera. It is super thin and pocketable. Definitely a great option for just pure portability, and again, pretty great image quality as well. And it does take rechargeable batteries, and you can even charge it just with a DC input on the side, which I've pretty much been doing most of the time. And then also just standard SD cards. Next up is the Sony CyberShot S2100. This is another 12 megapixel camera, but from Sony, and this was released in 2010. So it matches this Canon camera in terms of just being the newest cameras in this list. And this is another camera that takes really sharp photos, you know, a lot more modern photos than these older cameras. It has a really big screen on the back. It has a 3x optical zoom range. This camera is super light and portable. The build quality isn't really the best. Like it's definitely very plasticky, really cheap plastic build quality. So durability probably isn't as good as some of these other cameras, but the size and weight and portability of this this is fantastic. It's powered by 2 AA batteries and it uses just a standard SD card slot. That's pretty much all there is to say about this one. Definitely another one of my personal favorites just to take around everywhere with me. And honestly, I'm always just really impressed by how much I like the photos coming out of this one. And then last but not least, this is probably the one that surprised me the most. So this is the Canon PowerShot A1100 IS. This is a 12 megapixel camera that Canon released in 2008. And this is kind of similar to the SX130. It might even have the same sensor. This one doesn't have quite as much of a zoom range, so it has a 4x zoom with image stabilization, but the image quality coming out of this is really, really great. Super sharp photos, really great image quality, and pairing that with just how tiny this camera is as well and how portable it is, I absolutely love the image quality coming out of the 1100 IS. And that wraps up the remainder of these cameras. I really hope this video helped you out. This obviously isn't the top 10 digicams ever made, ever. Like, there's hundreds, if not thousands of different digicams out there from different brands, different resolutions, different features. I really just wanted to share 10 of them that I really enjoyed using over the last year that are all pretty different from each other, just so you can really compare the differences between wildly different resolutions and ages of digicams. But that's it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.